Let's start at the top. Are sanctuary cities legal in your view?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I do not believe they are legal because, as the Attorney General mentioned, 8 U.S.C. Section 1373, it's a federal law, and it prohibits local and state law enforcement agencies from restricting the sharing of immigration status with federal authorities. Okay, so they must, by law, share this information. So what typically happens is when an illegal immigrant or even a green card holder lands in jail, then there's an interest that ICE has, and ICE will place what's called an ICE hold or a detainer on that person in the jail. So theoretically, if that person is released on bail or otherwise is released on the local charges, then they would be transferred over to immigration holding facilities in federal custody to begin immigration legal proceedings. But what happens is sanctuary cities or counties just simply ignore the immigration hold and release that person back into the community. So no, I don't think they're legal at all.
Okay, so what are the options for the Attorney General if he wants to crack down on these sanctuary cities?
Well, the biggest thing that he has at his disposal, of course, is the power of the purse. And there's who knows how much money that goes to local and state law enforcement agencies from the federal government to in the form of various grants. There's just no way to even calculate the number. It's massive. So to withhold massive amounts of federal money because someone or a sheriff or a police chief just decides that they're not going to honor ICE holds is, as a taxpayer, I think irresponsible, because it places a bigger burden on the local taxpayer to support the law enforcement services that taxpayers receive, and it creates an incentive for undocumented or illegal aliens to move to a certain jurisdiction. It pulls on their social resources, social services. And, the other thing that you got to keep in mind, if you create this sanctuary city, you're creating an environment where you're basically inviting illegal aliens to come there. And if they think they're doing a service of some type to immigrants, they're mistaken, because if I'm in charge of the local immigrations and customs enforcement, and I know that county A or county B or city A or B is not complying with federal law, I'm going to target my enforcement actions there because it becomes a target-rich environment. So it's really just an ill-conceived policy from many different angles for a jurisdiction to decide that they're going to label themselves as a sanctuary city. They're not doing immigrants any favors at all.
Okay, so the Attorney General has the power of the purse, which means that he's announced that he wants to start cracking down financially, withholding federal funds from these cities so long as they continue to harbor illegal aliens. Is this something that is going to receive a huge opposition within the legal system? Is this going to be like the executive actions that the president has had that left of center judges have moved to block them?
This is entirely different. It's sort of like the federal highway funds, right? The Congress can't really say that the speed limit on Interstate 75, for example, which runs through where I live in Atlanta, it has to be a certain speed. But what it can do is they can say, we're not going to give you any funds, federal funds, that is, to maintain that unless you set a certain speed limit. So it really is not subject to judicial review. These grants that the Attorney General refers to are optional. I mean, there's no requirement that they hand out the money at all, and it's entirely different from the executive order on immigration because it's the federal government's money, and they get to decide where they spread it around. And if they choose to withhold it from an agency or a jurisdiction that is not compliant with federal law, then that's entirely their prerogative. So I don't see it being anything close to the legal issue that was presented in the immigration orders, and I thought those were non-issues as well, but this is even less.
Once again, our guest is Philip Holloway. He's a legal analyst. And one thing that I'm curious about was the specific wording that the Attorney General used when discussing this topic yesterday, is that he didn't say technically we're going to pull the funds. He merely indicated that you're on notice and we might at one point pull the funds. Why the half measure? Why not just flat out say this is why the president got elected? He vowed to crack down on sanctuary cities. We now have the power of the purse. We are cracking down today.
Well, I think that he is wanting to, if I had to guess, I would say that he's just putting everybody on notice that, look, this is the way that it's going to be. There's a new sheriff in town. I'm the Attorney General, and this is going to be the policy of the federal government as set out by the president, and I'm going to enforce it. And so I'm giving you this opportunity to do the right thing. And I don't necessarily see it as a half measure. I see it as being a fairly definitive statement that this is the way that it's going to be. And if you want federal funds, then you need to start complying with federal law, and you need to start in honoring these immigration or ICE holds when someone who is a non-citizen, whether they're a green card holder or just an illegal alien altogether, when they land in a jail and there's something that triggers an immigration proceeding, because illegal aliens have no right to be here in the first place. So when they're merely arrested, then they can have an ICE hold placed on them. A green card holder, if they're convicted of certain crimes known as aggravated felonies under federal immigration law, once they are convicted, then that can trigger deportation proceedings as well. So these local jails, local law enforcement agencies have an obligation to honor these ICE holds under those circumstances.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So how quickly could we see some of these things implemented if the Attorney General does want to start withholding funds from these cities for harboring illegal aliens? How quickly could we see action on this?
I think it's immediate because, for example, here in the local metro Atlanta area, one county has recently said that, they're not going to be honoring ICE holds. So if today that jurisdiction applies for a grant from the Department of Justice for some particular special law enforcement project, they can expect the answer to be no. So it can literally begin immediately.
Okay, a couple other questions in terms of legal issues that are in the news right now. And again, my guest, Philip Holloway. Let me ask you about some of these deep state leaks that are out there. This at Breitbart, we've covered this a lot, and I think this is a much bigger issue than the non-substantiated connection between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, where there's been no hard evidence presented. There's been plenty of hard evidence out there that there are parts of our government and our bureaucracies, they're particularly in the intelligence community, leaking information about the president in an effort to damage his reputation and his administration. This has not been a media focus. What is these must be some incredible laws that have been violated here. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And it's the smoking gun, if you will, here that a crime has occurred is any given newspaper article, the New York Times or whatever, that cites, unnamed sources in the intelligence community tell us X, Y, and Z. Because if X, Y, and Z is classified material and the New York Times or any other media outlet is reporting on it, that's the smoking gun. And you can make the argument that is sedition. I mean, it's really Watergate on steroids, because you have the federal government itself, this inner machinery, operating directly against the commander-in-chief and operating against the best interest of the United States. So that is the smoking gun, and those are very, very serious problems. And if there's any laws violated by anybody, of course it should be investigated. But that's breathtaking that you've got members of the intelligence community committing treason or espionage against its own government. it blows my mind. And I think that needs to be the primary focus of all of these investigations, is finding out where these leaks happen and stopping them from happening again.
Philip Holloway, last question for you today is about Judge Gorsuch, who has sailed through his hearings, has incredible, overwhelming support, right of center, and even overwhelming respect left of center, yet there's still talk about him being filibustered. I think this would backfire on the Democrats, but do you have any predictions or thoughts on this topic?
I've got several, but primarily I would point out that he has been recommended for confirmation by none other than the lead counsel for the state of Hawaii in its recent challenge to the immigration ban. Okay, former acting assistant or acting solicitor general of the United States, Professor Katyal, has said, look, this is a guy that should be confirmed. So when you have voices on the left and voices on the right and voices everywhere in the middle that say he should be confirmed, to not do so is simply obstructionism. And if I had to guess, I would guess that the leader McConnell will do what he has promised to do and confirm him by whatever means necessary. And if it means the nuclear option, changing the rules of the Senate, well, Harry Reid sort of set the stage for that. He set the mold. He showed the Republicans how to do it, and I think that they'll do it if they need to.
That's Philip Holloway, legal analyst. Where can we find you online, Philip?
Well, you can go to HollowayLawGroup.com, and of course on Twitter I'm at Phil Holloway, ESQ. That's HOLLOWAY, ESQ, and I really appreciate being with you today.
I appreciate you taking the time. Great analysis from you, and we'll have to have you back.